Yeah, better make this quick because I've got to lunch with my boss later. Got a shirt on that says "Stay single." Probably can't read that, but I think it's probably pretty good advice. Um, Maybe it sounds like a strange thing to make the topic of discussion, but I've been really into like civil rights literature and YouTube videos and films and things. Started off with a MUBI subscription. MUBI, MUBI, is a subscription service where it's like Netflix or Prime or whatever, but instead it has been really careful with the curation of what's on there. So you get to see a lot of international films. You get to see things that have done well at Cannes Film Festival, and things in the Criterion Collection and things like that. They are as close as could be considered objectively good films because they're so critically acclaimed, and it's more about critical acclaim than it is about audience popularity. So I thought I'd subscribe to that just to see what it was like. I got my 7-day free subscription. I used my dad's email because for some reason I'd already made an account, even though I'd never watched it before. It didn't make any sense to me. And I decided to watch the Malcolm X film by Spike Lee, which is incredible. And I assumed that it would be just. I'm kind of pessimistic when it comes to films. I tend to expect films to be cliche ridden and bore me and be something I've seen 100 times before. Instead, Malcolm X was an incredibly good piece of art. You could argue there are film beats that we've seen before. You'd have to figure out exactly, what films preceded it to work out where those cliches came from, I suppose. But as a cohesive piece of work, it's incredible. Somehow packing in this whole odyssey of a life is no small feat from Spike. And I didn't know a thing about Malcolm. I did not know a thing. I just knew that he was this famous figure in civil rights. So what I decided to do was then jump down the rabbit hole, watch every YouTube video featuring a speech of his or featuring any kind of interview or documentation of him. What I don't like on YouTube is the prevalence of YouTubers, and this is very ironic, talking about the figure. I prefer to watch the actual footage of the figure. This isn't me giving you Malcolm's life story. If you want that, read his autobiography, read the Wikipedia article, watch the film, whatever, doesn't matter. But archival footage is 1,000 times more interesting to me than someone discussing it. But this isn't that. This isn't as hypocritical as it sounds. I'm not going to do that. I just found it fascinating. It's such a good film. And then I started to think a lot about films based on real events. And are they moral? Are they not moral? There was something kind of... The Malcolm X one went well, in my view. Then I was watching, later on, a lot of interviews with David Foster Wallace. I hadn't even read a word of the man's writing. I've since bought Infinite Jest and a book of essays. But I hadn't read a word of his, but he's so iconic with the bandana and the Charlie Rose interviews and things like that. So I went and watched a lot of them. And then I saw that there's a film with Jason Segel playing him, and I watched it, and it's just got that Hollywood gleam over it. Despite the fact everyone says it's a good film, I haven't watched it. I can't judge it properly. I literally can't. The comments in the YouTube video will say, wow, what a touching, great monument to his legacy, his life, his thoughts, that sort of thing. Something about seeing Jason Segel in that bandana, pretending to be this guy and using a dead man's words, and it's very strange, resurrecting his ghost. But I didn't get that of Malcolm, and I think because even though, like I said, I didn't have this huge connection with David Foster Wallace, I'd at least at that point watched hours of him talking. Malcolm, I didn't know anything, so the film was my first impression, and it got me thinking something about seeing Hollywood sort of resurrect this dead person's skin almost, and crawling inside it and puppeteering it and turning that into a film rather than just, I don't know, putting money into marketing his books more, his words more, or publishing essays about him, or whatever. Something about animating his character after his death for a Hollywood film to rake in money, it just felt so off. And Jesse Eisenberg and everything. And I've been trying to rack my brains about why I like one and not the other, and I'm trying to figure out if that is because I knew one a little bit before and I didn't know much about the other before. But I sort of, fell in love with the Malcolm X story from the film, and then that became my motivation to read and watch more about him. Whereas David Foster Wallace, I started with the information and then have approached just the trailer, remember, of the David Foster Wallace film. I don't remember what it's called, with a real sense of sort of pessimism. So I have a backup about it, and I'm wondering if that will always be true. But yeah, anyway, it started this I like to learn about things through a process that I like to call mycelial. Like mycelium, mushrooms, their network underground, how they communicate things. It's not a one-to-one, but it's the word that I use. With knowledge, I like it to branch out. So I don't like to just randomly pick a thing to be interested in. It relates somehow to the last thing I was looking at, and a lot of these videos, that's exactly what they're going to be. They're going to be like, once I've figured out a big bit of the mycelium, that all connects together, that becomes a video. It makes sense. So Malcolm took me then to, after I'd watched tons and tons of his interviews, listened to them, and watched lots of footage of him speaking and things like that. Found out he wasn't the guy I thought he was. I mean, like I said, I knew nothing about him, but the one thing I knew was that he was the radical one, and he was the potentially hateful one and violent one, etc., etc. I ended up agreeing with him on pretty much everything, and the things that I didn't agree with him on were early interviews when he was with the Nation of Islam, and I found that he reversed a lot of those bad opinions after he'd been to Mecca. So like the Malcolm that died, that was shot, was the one I agree with. They killed him at exactly the point when I think we had like a one-to-one agreement on things. So that was crazy. And obviously, if you're going to be dealing with Malcolm, then I decided to watch a Netflix documentary called Blood Brothers about his friendship with Muhammad Ali. Well, then I thought, wow, Muhammad Ali, I don't know much about him either. I mean, I know that he had fast feet. I knew that he changed his name. I knew that his original name was Cassius Clay. I knew he called it his slave name. I knew that he was a champion. I knew he'd fought Liston and Joe Frazier and people like that. I knew about the Rumble in the Jungle. That I knew all the surface. It wasn't good enough for me to know just the surface. So I decided that I'd watch this. I didn't realise they knew each other. So, when I watched that, really, really enlightening, very good documentary, but I would say only for people who don't know beyond the surface, because otherwise they go over events you'll probably likely already really know. Interviewing a lot of friends and family, very close friends and family, daughters, brothers, that sort of thing. The whole thing was fascinating, and then that's led me to watching Ali fights and interviews as well, finding out that he's also a really intelligent guy with a very interesting trajectory. So I've been watching the Ali film. I say I've been watching with that tense because I haven't watched it all the way through yet. I watch bits and bobs of films. I have a very ADHD type brain where I watch 20 minutes of something, read 20 minutes of something, pick up another book, read 20 minutes of that, go play video games, go watch a film. It's a real integral part of my opinions about the world because I've experienced media in this way. It's very frenzied. But anyway, so Ali, the film. Will Smith plays Ali, and he does the voice, very much so. And there are times when I feel like he's overdoing it. He's talking like that with the same cadence in every single sentence. Sometimes it makes him sound really slow, and it doesn't always work. And then other times you go, wow, that really sounded just like him. Yeah, I've heard Ali say that, and that sounded one-to-one. They put a lot of effort into making sure that the iconic moments were like perfectly, correctly produced. The action is filmed really, really well. Like the boxing fights look exciting. They cut out all the, when you're watching a boxing fight and the two guys, there's a lot of it where they're just sizing each other up and just making sure that they don't get a punch in the face in the next couple of seconds and trying to find a way to make it land. They cut all that out, so it's almost like watching a highlight reel of the fights, but that's what you want, and there's a real sense of impact with each punch. I think they did it really well. But I saw a lot of complaints about the Ali film on Letterboxd and places like that, saying, well, I came here for a sports movie, and what is this? It's hardly about the sport. That's what I'm loving about the Ali film so far, because, like I said, I've complimented the way that they have presented the fights. Yeah, that's done then. We don't need that for 2 hours. Who wants that for 2 hours? I think the film's longer than 2 hours. The rest is what is interesting, the life, the humour, the character. What are you talking about? The trajectory of a character arc that was real. So, despite the fact that they cut out, well, I think it's one of the most interesting parts of Ali's life, which I learned about recently, which was when he got the gold medal in the Rome Olympics, and then he went to a bar, and they said they wouldn't serve his kind, and so he chucked the gold medal in the river. I don't know which river, I'm not versed enough in American geography, but I'm guessing it was one of the big ones, like the Hudson or something like that, and I just think that's a really good story, and it kind of seems like such a clear kind of peripeteia moment for him, where there's no going back now. He's changed after that. It's altered his point of view forever. You reach the top of the mountain and you realise that you're actually still at the bottom of the mountain in your own home country. Very interesting. So watch that, or rather I'm watching that, and there's a lot to do with Malcolm. And apart from the scene of Malcolm's death, which so similarly made, which is good because that means that was the way it happened, presumably, unless they were completely biting Spike. But I've looked it up, and that is something like, I think it was 12 pistol shots or something and 2 shotgun blasts. That seemed about accurate to what both films presented. Very violent, very horrible. But the other scenes of Malcolm were scenes that the Denzel Washington film didn't actually cover, which is all the stuff with Ali. I thought it was amazing because it's almost like watching that one and then watching Ali was like as an extension of the Malcolm X film I'd already loved. And the guy who played Malcolm in the Ali film does a great job as well. He's not Denzel Washington, but he's still pretty amazing. You can suspend your disbelief that that's who that is. So that was the mycelium thing. I get interested in this figure, find out that this person has a relation through a documentary, then watch the film about them and realise that it's almost a sequel. Really, really interesting. Now you could say Will Smith, it's not his fault, I suppose, at this point in time, but it kind of takes you out of it for a little bit, because I am seeing Will Smith based on the Will Smith legacy that survives today. The slap, blah, blah, blah. But also just like things like, I like pretty girls. If you don't know that song, look it up. Well worth your time. I imagine whether you love it or hate it, it's just an interesting thing to observe. Someone do at the height of that sort of fame. It's a very catchy song. Anyway, I'm seeing that person when I'm watching the film rather than seeing Ali himself, but I'm not sure that's his fault. And I was trying to think in my head as I was watching it, is there a better person I would have cast at that time? Probably not. I think it's a good piece of casting. I think if I watched it when it came out, which I think was like, I want to say 2006 or something like that, I don't remember. I probably wouldn't have had that in my mind at all. Not sure if that's before or after Men in Black, but that's what I always associated Will Smith with in childhood. And then, for example, like Ali, when he won the Liston fight in the film, brings up Sam Cooke. I'm assuming that happened in real life. I haven't verified that. And they have Sam Cooke singing right at the start of the film as well. So I immediately started listening to a Sam Cooke album, while I was reading another time, later in the day, and that was extremely enjoyable. And I think that this way of branching out, this mycelial way of surrounding yourself with knowledge, media, experiences that connect with each other, it means that when you go to them, they already had a root, and that makes them a lot stronger in your mind, a lot more able to be appreciated. There are so many times, I'm sure that everyone listening to this can relate as well, where you read a book for the first time, or you watch a film for the first time, and everyone has said it's great. They've said, "Oh my God, this is just the best film." And as you're watching it, you just can't see why they're saying that, and the whole time you're thinking, when is it going to get to that bit where it lives up to that expectation? And it just kind of never does, or it doesn't for long enough that you actually turn it off, like 10 minutes in or something like that, or a few pages in if it's a book. And I think that's because the root doesn't exist. Those films or books have been made for people with pre-existing roots, because the author had those pre-existing roots. Our films that we make are based on films that we've seen. This is not a tricky concept, hopefully. So what that means is, if your viewer has had no connection whatsoever with the films that informed this one, and I'm using films just because it's these days more popular as an art form than books, then there's not going to be a connect, or there's much less likely chance of there being a connect. So yeah, the last part of this is that I just sprungboard off, that's not a word, but let's make it a word, to James Baldwin, looked up some of his documentaries, some of his interviews, watched those, debates, things like that. Very interesting figure. I sort of don't know where I stand with him yet, but I like that. I'm very keen on reading one of his books, because the way he talks is not, in my opinion, conducive to good writing. It's conducive to good conversation. And I'm very interested, because he structures his thoughts in a very bizarre way when he speaks. It's very, very unique. No one else seems to speak like that. So I'm very keen to see if that voice comes across in his books as well. So I've got one in the mail currently. It's on its way. I'm pretty sure it's Giovanni's Room, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the one I got. This is the one I'd heard of before, so that's the one I want to start with. I also saw an interview between him and Maya Angelou where they were talking, and she praised that one a lot. And she said that a lot of other people have praised that one. So that's the one I'll start with. So that has taken me there, and if that becomes a favourite book of mine, when I open it up, I already have this grounding of, this person has said, I know what he's said about Malcolm, I know what he said about these others, and so I'm going to start Giovanni's Room with a backdrop, and then when it comes to, for example, Louis Farrakhan, I'd heard that name so many times. I'd heard people like Kanye talk about him. I vaguely knew that he was a figure in that realm, but I couldn't have told you anything really that he had to say. So I watched an interview with him talking about Malcolm, because again, that's my root. I hear him talk about Malcolm. I might then learn to love him, or know about him, or despise him. And then when I hear him talk about other things, that's already established then, because I know him, and I feel like I know his face and his voice and his general cadence and everything like that. As it stands, I don't have any opinion, high or low, of him. I would say he's very much neutral in my mind at the minute, and no hatred towards him, no love towards him. I just know that he's the current and I guess longest serving leader of the Nation of Islam, and if he is promoting clean living, as it seems like is the central tenet of it, and discipline, and trying to avoid crime and violence and things like that, then sounds fine with me. But I might need to look up him more, because obviously you could have said the same about Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm's teacher. And then when you find out more about him, you find out that he didn't practice everything he preached. And for someone who bases his whole life on the tenets of those teachings and the principles of them, it makes a lot of sense why you would want to split from them and speak out against them if you found that out, because it's such an unbelievable life-altering breach in your sense of intellectual security around it. I also ordered Martin Luther King's autobiography, which was written posthumously. It was a collection of his letters and speeches and writings after he died. So technically it's not his autobiography, but it's compiled as if it is. It seems from the introduction of it, which is the only part I've read, to be as accurately and meticulously crafted to be his own voice and his own words as possible, while still remaining cohesive. Malcolm X's autobiography is currently also in the mail. I plan on reading that pretty much as soon as I can get my hands on it. I know the film was based on that, so I think it's going to, a lot of it's going to be very recognisable, but just hopefully there'll be some extra insights from his own brain that I'll find very interesting on certain characters and things like that. I know that he talks about Ali for a bit in it as well, which I'll find interesting. And then finally I also got the Long Walk to Freedom, which is a book I've heard of hundreds of times. And Nelson Mandela is someone that I feel sort of shamefully low knowledge on, because I only know the very most basic outline of his life and career, and I'd very much like to know more, and I know that the book itself is extremely well received. So again, now's the time to read it. When would I otherwise read it? I've grown these roots, I've grown these mycelial connections. Now it's all gonna make much more sense. Obviously that's jumping to another nation and to another time, but it's still all relevant stuff, and so it makes it that much more interesting. I always consume things in phases like this.